Hello fellow travelers and welcome to another episode of In-Depth Boss Guide series where we take a closer look at the VAT's major threats. I'm too lazy to be awesome and this time we'll talk about the Pyro Regisvine, also known as Pyro Flower. First thing you can notice is that Pyro Regisvine doesn't move during a fight, it only rotates to face your character. You can use it to your advantage and rely more on summons or abilities which work in a set area, since they will be at the top of their efficiency. Pyro Regisvine has highly increased resistance to all damage in its normal state. In order to start dealing any noticeable damage to it, you should stun it first by breaking one of its cores. While stunned, boss doesn't attack you and its resistances will be drastically reduced, so it's your best chance to deal damage to it. The root core will reform in about a minute and a half after being destroyed, so even if you don't have enough damage to kill Pyro Flower in 2 stuns, just wait a little and focus on dodging its attacks and replenishing your resources until the core reappears. Keep in mind that you can't damage the cores with any kind of physical attacks. In order to damage them, you have to apply any element other than Pyro to them. Hydro works best here. You can easily break the core with any Hydro character. I just want to remind you that Barbara's skill and Sincho's rain swords apply Hydro to enemies around your character, so if you stay close to the core with these effects being active, they will deal additional damage to it. Second best option is Electro. It's twice less efficient than Hydro but still can deal with the cores in reasonable amount of time. Other elements also work, but they are twice less efficient than Electro, so I would not recommend to rely on them to destroy the core. The only thing that you might consider is to bring Anima to trigger Hydro-infused swirls, which can speed up the process, but it's not really necessary if you bring Hydro anyway. Fighting Pyro Flower without reliable way to destroy its cores is just very tedious, so make your life easier and bring something to deal with them as fast as possible. Last thing to mention here is that once you break the Corolla core for the first time, it will become the weak spot of the boss for the rest of the fight, forcing aimed attacks to deal critical damage when you hit it. With that being said, let's take a closer look at what Pyro Flower can throw at you. When it comes to attacks, there are several we've already seen before. Faceplant, Flail and Spin are literally the same as of Pyro Regisvine, except this time they deal pyro damage. On Faceplant, boss slams its Corolla into the ground, releasing 3 fire trails in a fan shape. Boss will stop following you while it's charging Faceplant, so in melee range you can easily avoid it by dashing to the side. The further you stand from the boss, the harder it will be to dodge this attack, because its AoE expands, but you can always rely on dashing iframes as well. Sometimes this attack can be used 3 times in a row. In this case, boss lifts its Corolla slightly sooner after the first slam, so you'll have to keep dodging hits with dashes or just run behind the boss to avoid the entire combo, because with each hit, boss only rotates slightly towards you. Flail is a close-range attack which is triggered if you stand behind the boss. In attempt to face you again, Pyro Flower will turn around with a swipe. Its range is short, so you can easily move away from this attack if you have to, or just time your dash right if you want to stay close. Once you break the root core, boss will start performing frontal flails as well, as a part of Flail, Flail, Faceplant combo. But since you know how to deal with all of those, it shouldn't be a problem. Also, every time Pyro Flower wakes up after being stunned, it performs an improved version of Flail, with the only difference being that this time it makes a full circle, instead of just a half. Another close-range attack is Spin. It's an area attack which hits everything around the boss. This attack can be triggered if you stand close to the boss, but it has a pretty long cooldown. Your best action is to dash away from it. After the spin, the ground around the boss will become infused with pyro, dealing damage to characters standing on it. This infusion persists for some time, forcing you to stay away from the boss, although you can ignore it with enough healing. Note that if you break a weak point while the ground is infused, you won't be able to safely attack the boss with melee characters. Pyro Flower has a variety of ranged attacks as well. First of them is Fireball. After a short charging period, it will launch Fire Seed at you. You can use dash to avoid damage or just stay in melee range. Boss won't be able to reach you there. Fire Seed will grow in time, then explode, leaving a pyro puddle on the ground, which will deal damage if you stand on it. You can destroy the seed using elemental attacks, or just lure it somewhere you are not planning to stay and completely ignore it. Another attack is homing shots. Boss creates 8 small and very slow homing projectiles. They will stop following you in several seconds, so you can just keep running to avoid them entirely or use dashes to make them hit the ground. But their damage is pretty low, so it's not a big deal to soak a couple of shots if you can afford it. Just be aware that if you get hit by too many of them, it will also stagger your character. The attack itself shouldn't cause you much trouble, but the tough part is to avoid it alongside with 1 or 2 attacks boss will use while you're dodging the shots, especially if you try to deal damage at the same time. So it's okay to take it slow here and play it safe. If you stand far away from the boss, it might also try to hit you with rapid fire. It will quickly shoot several rounds of fireballs at you. You can run closer towards the boss to avoid all of the shots, or just keep running around until it stops. Last attack is Eruption. Boss use it only when its root core is broken and you stand far away from it. Pyro Flower creates eruptions near you, and if you stand on them, they will not only deal damage, but also launch your character up in the air. Be careful with it, because this time boss can actually aim. It's quite hard to deal with it if you stand far away from the boss, but it gets much better if you come closer. During this attack, the Corolla core will be slightly lower than usual, so besides common ways, you can also reach it with mage's charged attacks or swirls. This will give you a chance to break the Corolla core and stun the boss. That's what we'll have to deal with throughout the fight. Now it's time to think what we can use to our advantage. Let's look at what we know so far to decide what can be your best bet when it comes to fighting Pyro Flower. Pyro Regisvine has highly increased resistance to pyro, which makes pyro damage ineffective. It's not completely useless since you can still use it to trigger Vaporize to boost Hydro or Reverse Melt to boost Cryo, but relying on pyro as your main source of damage is not the best idea. Hydro, on the other hand, makes the fight much easier, because Hydro attacks make short work of boss weak points. And since this is the best strategy for the fight, bringing it is highly recommended. Other than that, there is nothing affecting character's performance when it comes to elements. When it comes to weapons, there is no better weapon for this fight. Well, technically there shouldn't be much of a fight at all. It's almost pointless to fight Pyro Regisvine while its core is not broken, since you deal very little damage to it, and after you break the core, the boss will be stunned, so you are free to use anything you prefer. Thus, the only real difference between weapons is the ways for you to break the cores. Mages are probably the best option, since all of their attacks always deal elemental damage. Archers can rely on charged attacks to deal elemental damage if their abilities are not available. But with melee characters you will have to rely solely on their abilities, so keep that in mind if you stick to them. Oh, and if you worry about them not being able to deal with the Corolla core easily, you really shouldn't. Boss will spam faceplants like no tomorrow when its root core is broken if you stay close, giving you plenty of chances to attack it. Anyway, just make sure you have a decent way to deal with the cores and pick whatever weapon suits you best. One great character who excels at this fight is Sincho. His burst alone can quickly deal with the cores, and he doesn't even have to be good for that, since damage doesn't matter and you can stay on the field with another character. Just keep staying close and using normal attacks. This allows you to use him with pretty much any team, no matter how good he is. If you want, you can also use his skill to speed up the process even further, or save it to deal more damage later. Another great character for this fight is Tartaglia, aka Child. He can quickly deal with the root core using his stance switching, and when it comes to dealing with the Corolla core, he doesn't even have to aim at it, since Riptide Flash procs there and applies Hydro for you. Most of his damage comes from his melee stance, but even if stance switching is on cooldown, you can utilize Pyro Flower's weak spot once you break its Corolla core for the first time to increase his DPS in ranged stance. So basically he has everything you could possibly need for this fight. Highly recommended. As for other stuff that works great, remember that you can abuse the fact that boss doesn't move, so pre-placed skills like summons or abilities with fixed AoE will be at the top of their efficiency. I hope with that in mind, fighting Pyro Regisvine will never be a problem to you anymore. So let's check what we can do to get a little bit of extra rewards here. There are 2 special achievements related to Pyro Regisvine that you can earn, and this time both are very simple. For the first achievement you have to destroy the seed that will be left after the fireball attack, and I don't think we really have to discuss that one. Just give it a splash of Hydro and move on. For the second achievement you have to defeat Pyro Flower without breaking the core in its Corolla. You can still stun the boss by breaking its root weak point, and if you don't have enough damage to defeat it within a single stun, you can wait for the core to reform or simply deal the rest of the damage without stunning the boss. I would not recommend you to go for the latter unless the boss is nearly dead, because you will deal much less damage and might accidentally break the Corolla core during that. Alternatively, you can always call your overpowered friends to kill the boss within a single stun, or join someone with lower world level to do it yourself, if you're looking for the easier solution. That's all I have for you this time, fellow travelers. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll have a nice day, and I'll see you in the next one.